Just felt like, wow, this is just like out in the middle of, I mean, I keep saying it's Georgia nowhere, but just, it's out there. It's just out there, and it just feels like it's going to be like that for a while.
There's literally like, there's a field of cows behind this thing. That's all that's near this monument. And it's interesting because people do go out there to graffiti, and people have like, gone out there like, to do druid rituals and whatnot. But and I can say that when we were out there looking, we were just there filming it and taking pictures. But there was like a little golf cart or whatever that drove down that gravel road and just kind of watched us for a while to see what we were up to.
Yeah, I think it was that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, it's because people come up there and sometimes they get up to no good and they do graffiti.
And they do penises on it. There's plenty of penises.
They draw it, and sometimes they come in and draw dicks on things.
Dicks on things.
You know, regular, standard Satanist stuff.
Yeah, so dicks on things.
I don't know how many times I've seen like one of these top 5 videos online of them. They're going through an abandoned place and find a quote unquote satanic ritual spot, and it's just dicks spray painted on the walls. So I'm like, guys, this isn't that scary, all things considered. And that was the most interaction we had.
That was kind of creepy too, because they didn't come talk to us. They were just like, "What are you doing?"
And we didn't know the context of that. It was just, again, for our perspective, there was just weirdos trailing us, but they were just making sure that we weren't up to no good to mess with the monument and stuff. So it's a very weird situation to go out and see all that.
But I'm glad we went, because it's one of those things. It's like you're in Savannah now, and I'm from Savannah. I'm sure we're going to get some Savannah stories. Savannah has a lot of topics and stories we can talk about. And I agree.
Oh yeah, every building here is haunted.
And I was there since I was 6th grade up to like 20 or something. So I grew up in like kind of formative years there. So I'll tell you, I don't see anything, but I'll tell you stories and places and weird things. There's some weird things happen to me, but being around,
we'll have to do that. Like in another episode, we'll get into our own personal ghost stories and things.
But this is another one that was just the first, and heck, maybe in the future, you never know. Maybe we'll go to other ones together. We'll go on trips to other weddings.
I'd love it.
It'd be great. But this is why I wanted to pick this topic, because it would, and like I said, it might be different now. It might be more commercial. I mean, just the town in general. But that memory is such a kind of interesting and lonely memory of that day, because it was just so quiet, and it was just, we were out there, and it's just, we stayed out for about an hour and did about a lot of film and footage maybe, but then it's just, and that they had that whole big museum and all that stuff, and it was just empty, and then we're leaving as sun went down. It really was the beginnings of a horror movie. It felt like, like it's like the sun's going down, it's time to head home, but that's when we would have probably broken down at that point, and then something else would have happened, and then I thought we just turned around into the town.
That was an eye-opener for me, too, in terms of how different people perceive these things differently. Because we went out there and we did a video, and we can post links if you want to see it. It's not a paranormal investigation. We're just goofing, looking at it and trying to do some of the background.
Stopping a Cracker Barrel on the way. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a total goof kind of road trip. And I remember...
That's how they all started. The Blair Witch. It started that way, too. They're joking around.
Yeah. And then, next thing you know... Dicks on balls.
Yeah, dicks on balls.
but I remember saying something like, they're trying to leave a message for the future, and what better way to do that than this? And someone on YouTube, like, that was one of my introductions to how nasty YouTube could be too. And these reactions weren't even nearly as bad as they could be. But people were like, "What are you talking about? They want to kill the Earth's population. How's that a good message?" It's like, I don't know, man. I wouldn't talk about that. Honestly speaking, that didn't even seem weird to me when we were looking at it. We're just like, it seemed out of place, but we never saw that as a sinister kind of.
Yeah, there's a weird thing. I mean, there's something to be said about the whole making stuff out of granite thing. I can see where they're, because I remember when we were there, it's like crazy, and there's dicks on the thing, and there's like, somebody like poured lacquer on that one side of it, remember? Like, it was so weird.
Yeah, it was like polyurethane paint. If you see pictures of it now, that section, it's clean.
They got it off?
Clean it. But that section is bleached.
Okay, they got it off.
Like, you can see it's still lighter than the rest of it, because you just about have to sandblast that. But come on, man, just carve your own rock Iraq if you feel that strongly.
But being there, there is despite what it says and despite all this stuff, I'm not like, we don't subscribe to anything. We're independents on this show. But like, I was like, there is a little bit of reverence. I remember feeling that way. Everybody just kind of quiets down. You're just like, this is weird. This is just like a thing out of stone, and like that big of a thing, like that big of a structure is. There's a bit of wonder to it, no matter what the implications are and what even. I remember feeling that when we were out
just
there.
Just being able to see someone made that out in the middle of nowhere, like we say, it's pretty interesting. And I don't know if I could stress anything to anybody, it's not to take anything too seriously, but especially stuff like this is like, just leave it. It's something written on a rock by a guy that's not even here anymore.
Yeah, and these guys, they had outdated opinions, and like you said, I think their mode of, like we said, just as small as those towns are, that was their probably contextual view of the world. So they're just like, this government's got to change, and whatever they do.
Yeah, and they weren't wrong about everything. They just, that you need to avail yourself of some of that diversity, because there's an intellectual diversity that's also necessary for the prosperity of future mankind.
Right.
But as far as things go, especially compared to not just some of their contemporaries, but some people who are out there in the world today, they were trying something a little bit more progressive and interesting than the average person.
Right.
I would call it, if it's a big swing and a miss, it's still a big swing.
And that's the thing. Besides maintaining humanity, 500 million guy reproduction rising.
Yeah, let's look at some of these other
number
ones.
3 is unite humanity.
They get increasingly benign.
But I think they get lovely, though. They get lovely after this, though. They start, we're going to rip the Band-Aid first. Here we go. And then it gets...
Yeah, give them wear the hard one on your sleeve, and then we'll try to ease them down.
So number 3 is unite humanity with a living new language. That's still a little creepy. Still a little like, well, I don't know.
They really believe that, though. I mean, there's like a whole thing about here. The sounds that we make determine the kinds of the ways we symbolize and the world and how we form our actual opinions of things. It's like these guys are pretty deep into it on this, because that's actually very true. And that's another thing to show you where these guys' heads was at. Like, there's no realistic way that you could make that work. But that's a beautiful idea, though.
Right.
And they even admit that they know about Esperanto.
Yeah.
Like, we know that's gone down before, and it didn't work.
Maybe this is what birthed Klingon. Klingon didn't come in until next generation, right? And that was before this. Is right, like 8 years before it. So.
That'll be the way.
So number 4 is rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Okay. That's good.
Yeah, solid rule.
Number 5, protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. I think everybody can agree to that. Right? He's like, Sean's like,
so
no,
far, so good.
Don't like it.
Yeah. I don't like fair or just.
What is it? Okay, so number 6, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. And it starts to get a little political.
Yeah, well, that's what I was talking about with that World Congress they wanted to start. They just thought, get everybody talking in a real body that can make real decisions.
Sort of an anti-globalist statement in itself, though, right? I mean...
Well, it's weird because they were...
And rule internally,
They
right?
were into globalism because they were... The book, anyway, it really seems to stress, like, getting away from nationalism as a rule and embracing a sort of global community while still allowing everyone to have their own national identity and culture. Like, that's why they had that idea of doing their World Congress as just basically the United Nations, but the book seems to think the United Nations just doesn't have enough power to matter. Like, people can just veto a ruling in the United Nations. It's like, well, the thing is, like you guys saying you need a World Congress and therefore a world army, like, you're basically talking about forming a world government. And you're not going to be able to get all these independent sovereign nations to decide to do that, to agree to do that. So it's a neat idea, but also if it has to be enforced with its own army, then you're going right back to the same status quo that you're trying to get away from. But I think their head was in the right place.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, everything that it seems okay. Okay, number 7, avoid petty laws and useless officials. Okay.
Yeah, that's
like
the one I start to have an issue with.
That's a little...
Because... Well, their idea of petty laws and useless officials, this is where the deregulatory slant starts to come in. It's like, stop hamstringing these makers of jobs and industry. It's like, well, that's just not what's happening. So that one is fine, but it's meaningless as a rule.
Yeah, it's just like, that's just a little personal dig. Number 8.
Yeah, if I knew it was a petty law, then I probably...
I mean, these things are just in the heart of... number 8, balance personal rights with social duties. It's like, well, good luck, because that's the problem we have politically right now. So that's literally the crux of
And that's another one that has a sort of ominous undertone,
right.
Because, like, you may think that you should have the right to have as many babies as you want and live in a welfare state, but maybe you should have more social duty than that.
Right.
It's like that's sort of the context
that's literally the
that
conflict
it takes in the book.
That's the heart of all government in the world right now. But then we get into the nice ones. Ready? Number 9, prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite.
Yeah,
now we're starting in like Desiderata stuff here. This is what it sounds like to me. You are a child. The number 10, be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. It ends with a little bit of drama there, which I like.
Well, I like how they knew where the buildup worked. Like technically, if you were going to do this in order of importance, if you really wanted to win people, you probably should have flipped the rules. Because if you'd open with that, people are like, that's nice. Instead, you're like, there's too many people. Need to get rid of most of them.
Well, it's also a bad mistake.
That probably
Never put definite
1.
numbers in your laws either. You know, it's like that's like
Yeah,
the Constitution
Why
going,
that specific
a horse will
number?
never be more than $2. He's like, well, okay, it's not a good idea. Numbers change, guys. It's like, what if we colonize the moon? We get over 500 million people then. What's wrong with that?
And as much as they talk about globalization, I'm not even 100% sure that they're meaning the global population of the Earth when they're talking about that. Because some of these rules seem to be built more around nation building than sort of world civilization building. And like, well, if we were going to maintain the population of America at 500 million, then that would be pretty close to what we're currently doing. But if that's the world population, then we have a problem.
It is weird. Like, this comes at just a time culturally that was just right before that, right before Reagan era. You know what I mean? The world did shift at this moment this thing was built too, which is interesting. I mean, there's no correlation, but not for this either. It's just, it was kind of a tumultuous time right there at 79, right? That was the beginning and end of a chapter right there, like 1980 basically, you know, 'cause then you get into excess. We kind of went against all this stuff, right, in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's so interesting about this. We did change and like go forward, but it was almost like this. Some of these, I mean, again, let's get rid of the crazy ones, but we're talking about overall intent. It feels like, right? Let's not leave anybody to crazy words. It feels like, hey, chill out is the kind of message of this, right? And coming from the 60s and the 70s, getting better, and the 70s are just like kind of a shit show compared to that. Like, you get the 80s, like, let's just chill out, and then you're like, or maybe not. Let's just do all these things that go against every single one of these things, basically. But prize beauty, prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Everybody does that, right? That's not a bad one.
Yeah, they're trying to leave a message of positivity. Like, you're right. You could fix this whole thing if you just not put a number on number 1. If you just said, why don't we just maintain the population of the Earth in balance with nature? Just leave
And
it
also,
at that.
don't
Like,
get
try to
specific,
prescribe
and then
a
don't
number.
get bodily specific. Like, let's not mention reproduction. Just say guide growth or like temper growth or something. You know, whatever it is. Like, when you say reproduction, that gets a little clinical, and it gets a little weird. Specifics are bad for prophecies
in
and stuff.
today's world. Yeah, it becomes political. Like that's a very
You never want to go in specifics
That's a very
when you're
personal
laying
thing.
out prophecies. That's mistake number 1.
Yeah.
Is don't do that.